Hello there. There we got some light. So whether you see the light, delay of light, but oh well, that's beside the point. Happy New Year, everybody. Or I hope everything's going well. Let's put it that way. Maybe it's not a Happy New Year for you, but that's what everybody says. And so I'm hoping that everything's going well for you for your New Year. Um, for those of you who watch football or you have significant others who watch football, hopefully your teams won, etc. But we shall see what we shall see. Um, That's all we can say about it, isn't it? Yeah, maybe, maybe not. And that's kind of the whole point of where I'm coming from today. The quote I've got is from Søren Kierkegaard, um, and it says, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." Now, you're going to sort of say, "Well, of course, yes, but do you really, really think in terms of where it's coming from?" So you're thinking, well, all right, I'm going to make an assumption that several of you have at least thought about New Year's resolutions. It doesn't mean you necessarily made them, but you thought about them. You may have thought about them long enough to basically say, I never make them anyway, so I'm not going to make them this year, but you at least gave some thought to it. But the new year does tend to bring with it the sense of a new beginning. It's, in this case, 2025 is over and done with. We're looking at 2026. And generally speaking, I think it's relatively safe to say that most people will tend to look at 2026 with the idea of hoping that, or any new year for that matter, that it's going to be better than what already happened. Or if 2025 in this case was good for you, that you're hoping that it's going to be good or as good as 2025 or better. You're still looking for some kind of improvement, if you will, over whatever you've already had. Would that be a fair statement to make? I don't know that most people are going to say, gee, I wish it was lousy. 2025 was fantastic, so I want 2025, 26 to be lousy. I don't know if they do. Well, I haven't met anybody like that. So I'm going to make work on the rash assumption. Assumptions I know can get me into trouble, but I'm still going to make on the rash assumption that generally speaking, you're looking forward to 2026 as being a better year than 2025 was, maybe your best year ever or whatever. But if you think about what Kierkegaard is talking about, we live it forward because we can't go backwards. It's done, it's finished. But if we don't think in terms of what got us where we are today, it's going to be very difficult to go forward to wherever it is that you want to go. Now, I'm going to use the example of weight for this particular initial conversation and say that you might say that, okay, I gained weight in 2025. I want to lose weight in 2026. Okay, that's nice. So if I said something to you like, how did you gain weight? You said, well, I ate too much. Okay, that's going to be somewhat the obvious, but let's think about this even more. Let's look at it a little more in depth in that case. Why did you eat too much? Did you just get into a bad habit? Did your diet change and you started to eat more junk food? Did you just, start instead of buying small bags of chips, did you start getting the family size because they were cheaper? And so you started to eat all of them? What was it that, in a sense, changed that started your behaviors to do something differently that you started to gain the weight? Did you start, did your uh, job hours change and you started watching more TV and so you started eating more chips? Did you do less exercise? So that if you start looking backwards at what was going on, start thinking in terms of, okay, what was it that started me on this habit of eating more food, which is what got me into losing more weight? Excuse me, gaining more weight. Because you can't really lose weight if you don't understand to a great degree why you gain it. Because most people will say, well, I just ate too much. But why did you eat too much? Are you depressed and you were feeding your depression because you thought that eating more was going to make you feel better? Or did you just start hanging out with people who were eating more? So in a sense, what were the things that were going on that got you into the eating more? So let's just say maybe different aspect of it. Maybe you got into a relationship and it's gone downhill. What happened with the relationship? Did you just tend to pick the wrong people? Did something happen? Do you do different things in that relationship that make things sort of like turn negatively? So if you just say something like, I always end up with the wrong people. So what are the people that you get attached to in the first place? So if you start thinking in terms of how these behaviors originate then you can begin to take a look at why, maybe, perhaps could be, or understand more about how they develop into whatever's going on. Now, there could be certain things like, let's just say right at this moment, you have a boss that's a jerk. Now, we have a difference here. Maybe you got a job and at the beginning of 2025, you were perfectly happy. Maybe your boss got sick. Maybe your boss got transferred or something, and then they moved somebody in and you didn't have any control over that. And the boss now is a jerk. That's a little different than if you got a job and the boss has been a jerk since day one. So the question is why did you get the job? Was it the only thing you had available? Did you think it was going to be something else? What was going on with that? So again, if you start taking a look at the things that come into play with your decisions, you can begin to get a sense of what got you into this position, which then gives you a better chance to figure out how to change that particular behavior. Does that make sense? So if you realize that maybe you get into lousy relationships, what is it that you do or that you get attracted by or something that keeps getting you into relationships with people who tend not to be great for you? Is it that you keep going to the same places and, seeing the same kinds of people? Do you just get introduced by friends and it's your friends who hook you up and maybe it's the nature of your friends? What is it that seems to be the consistent, persistent, underlying theme across all these behaviors? So that if you take a look backwards and begin to understand what's going on, what got you to this position, you're in a much better position to go forward and do something to change it. Because if you really don't like the idea of the fact that you've gained weight, if you don't quite understand why you started eating more food, it's going to be really difficult for you to change your diet and do anything to lose that weight because you're going to continue to fall into the trap of the same behaviors and it's not going to go anywhere. If it's the same, you get into bad relationships, what's going on? If you keep picking the wrong job or whatever it is, if you find yourself doing repetitive behaviors that you keep saying, why does this always happen to me? Have you taken a look back at saying, okay, so when we get back to point X, square one, what decisions do you make or don't make, as the case may be, but you still, whatever you do, even if you don't make a decision, you're still making a decision. Not making a decision is making a decision. So if you get into a situation in which you say, well, I'll just let it happen, you've just made a decision. So that could be where things are going on. You're not looking at all the details and making a decision and making a different change, and you're just sort of like letting things happen however it's going to work out. So that is, I'm going to suggest that if you look backward and think about how you've lived your life in the past year or two or three, as the case would be, and think in terms of what you're doing to get you to where you are today. Now, it doesn't mean you have to have everything thought out, not by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying you need to have long plans to figure out what you're going to do to change. I'm not making any suggestions like that at all. All I'm basically saying is, have you thought about what got you to where you are right now? And then if you begin to understand that, you tend to start making slightly different decisions from that moment on because you are more likely to be aware of what got you to that point in the first place. So let's just say you've got a friend who keeps hooking you up with somebody that turns out to be lousy for you. If you start becoming aware that maybe I'm not going to go out with those dates from, good old Mary, maybe you'll say, sorry, Mary, I'm not interested or whatever. That's going to be a slight different change and see where that takes you. If you discover that you've just like this real television show because you've got nothing better to do, and so you start eating in front of the TV, then that gives you some awareness that maybe, hey, I need to look at something when I come home and start watching this particular TV program. There are a couple of things you can do about that. But the more you become aware of what's going on, the better you've got a chance of figuring out what is happening, which gives you a chance to take an initial step to do something different. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go off and suddenly tomorrow you're going to have a completely different life. And, that's not likely to happen. All I'm suggesting right now is that you think about where you are and what your first step needs to be. Because if you begin to become aware of where that is and what you might do and how might small things might change to change where you want to go, you might be able to have a really different end to this particular year and actually might follow through on your New Year's resolution should you decide to make them. Does this make sense? I hope. If not, ask me a question. I'm going to suggest, hit reply and tell me what's the resolution, if you will. What's the difference you want from this year, or this year, meaning 2026, than from last year? How do you want that to change? Use any way whatsoever. And you may have an idea of what needs to change or what you would like to change, but until you actually put it into practice, you never know what's going to happen. No. Clarity comes when you actually get some execution in there, right? So just think about what's going on, and think about where you're going and where you are and how you got here, and see if that makes a difference about how you go forward with this brand new year. So again, with Kierkegaard's quote, I'll give it to you again. Life can only be understood backwards. Let's start that again. Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. But you have to understand what happened before you can go forward. I hope this is helpful, and we'll chat with you later. Happy New Year. Bye.